Everyone expected her to choose family, but she chose the one thing they feared most: love. She didn't leave quietly. Love rarely lets anyone go in silence. On the morning she walked away from everything, the sky was heavy, as if it already knew what she was about to lose. The house behind her stood tall and familiar, filled with memories, expectations, and promises she had never made but was somehow expected to keep. Her phone buzzed endlessly in her pocket, her name echoing in missed calls, but she didn't answer. She took one last look at the life she had built brick by brick and stepped forward, knowing there was no turning back. Some choices don't scream, they break you from the inside. This was one of them. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the courage it takes to follow your heart even when the world stands against you, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Your support keeps stories like this alive. Her name was Ariba, and from the outside, her life looked perfect. She came from a respected family, one that valued tradition, reputation, and carefully planned futures. She had a stable job, a clear path laid out for her, and people who constantly reminded her how lucky she was. But luck is a strange thing. Sometimes it feels like a gift, and sometimes it feels like a cage. Ariba felt trapped in expectations that were never hers, in a life that looked right to everyone except the one person living it. She met him at a time when she wasn't searching for anything. Love has a way of doing that, entering quietly through ordinary moments. He wasn't wealthy, powerful, or impressive by society's standards. He carried his struggles openly, wore his honesty without polish, and spoke with a sincerity that felt rare. What started as comfort slowly became connection, and connection deepened into something she couldn't explain but couldn't ignore either. With him, she felt seen, not as a daughter, an employee, or a responsibility, but as a human being with dreams and fears of her own. But love, especially the kind that challenges social rules, never comes without a price. When her family found out, the warmth in the house turned cold. Conversations became confrontations. Concern turned into control. They told her she was being emotional, reckless, blinded by feelings that would fade. They reminded her of sacrifices they had made, of honor, of what people would say. Every word felt like a rope pulling her back toward a life she no longer recognized as hers. Ariba tried to fight for both worlds at first. She tried to convince her family that love didn't have to be an enemy of tradition. She tried to make him believe that patience would eventually soften hearts. But days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, and nothing changed except her exhaustion. She lived in a constant state of tension, smiling on the outside while quietly breaking on the inside. At night, she lay awake wondering when loving someone had become an act of rebellion. The pressure was relentless. She was given ultimatums disguised as advice. She was reminded of her responsibilities again and again. The future they painted for her was safe and predictable, but empty. The future she imagined with him was uncertain, filled with risk, but alive. And somewhere between fear and hope, she realized that not choosing was still a choice, one that was slowly destroying her. The hardest part wasn't the anger or the disappointment in her family's eyes. It was the doubt that crept into her own heart. What if they were right? What if love wasn't enough? What if she lost everything and gained nothing in return? These questions haunted her, growing louder with each passing day. But there was another voice too, softer but steadier, reminding her how she felt when she laughed freely, when she dreamed without guilt, when she imagined a life built on honesty rather than obligation. The breaking point came quietly. One evening, after yet another argument that ended with silence heavier than words, Ariba looked at her reflection and barely recognized herself. She saw someone shrinking, someone learning to suppress joy to keep peace. And in that moment, something inside her shifted. She understood that staying would mean losing herself completely. Love wasn't just about him anymore. It was about choosing a life where she could breathe. Walking away was not dramatic. There were no grand speeches or emotional goodbyes, just a suitcase packed with essentials and a heart heavier than the bag she carried. Every step away from her home felt like tearing a page out of her past. The street outside looked the same, but she felt different. Exposed and terrified, yet strangely free. She didn't know what awaited her, only that she couldn't remain where she was. The world didn't suddenly become kind because she chose love. Reality hit hard. There were days filled with uncertainty, moments when money was tight, and nights when fear whispered that she had made a terrible mistake. Society judged quickly and forgave slowly. Friends disappeared, and familiar comforts were gone. She learned how lonely courage could be. But she also learned how strong she was when she had no choice but to be. With him, life was simple but honest. They built routines from scratch, celebrated small victories, and supported each other through failures. Love didn't erase their problems, but it made them bearable. She worked harder than she ever had before, discovering skills she never knew she possessed. Every achievement, no matter how small, felt earned. Slowly, the fear that once controlled her began to loosen its grip. Time has a way of changing perspectives. The same family that once refused to listen began to watch from a distance. They saw her standing on her own feet, not broken as they had feared, but stronger. Pride mixed with regret, and silence softened into curiosity. Healing didn't happen overnight, and forgiveness was a slow, careful process. But walls that once seemed permanent began to crack. Ariba realized that walking away hadn't meant abandoning her roots, it meant redefining them. Love had not taken everything from her, as she once feared. It had stripped away what was false and left behind what truly mattered. She learned that sometimes you have to lose the life you planned to find the life that was waiting for you. Years later, when she looked back at that morning under the heavy sky, she no longer felt fear. She felt gratitude. Gratitude for the courage she didn't know she had, for the pain that taught her resilience, and for the love that demanded honesty rather than comfort. Her journey wasn't perfect, but it was real, and that made all the difference. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of a choice you once faced or are facing right now, please take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who might need strength, and subscribe to the channel. Your engagement helps these stories reach the people who need them most. Before this story ends, we have a special request for you. Comment below and tell us, would you have had the courage to walk away from everything for love? Ariba's story is not just about romance. It's about the quiet bravery it takes to choose yourself when the world tells you not to. It's about understanding that love, real love, doesn't cage you, it sets you free. And sometimes, the most powerful step forward begins with the hardest goodbye.